Hey, welcome everybody. Hi, Guy.
Hi, Becca.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
So welcome to our kind of podcast style live. We're going to be reading under, or Michelle's going to be reading Under the Hood for us today. I'm excited.
Oh, I'm really excited.
And then we're going to have like a little discussion over what we've read today. We're not going to read the whole thing because there is a lot. Not a lot, but enough. And yeah, we're just going to discuss each topic as we hit it.
And then we're gonna do it at a further date. We'll do more.
Yeah.
And everybody can be involved in asking questions or talking.
Yeah. So if you guys have any questions, throw them out there. All right, Michelle,
Yes,
are you ready?
Take it away.
Yes, you were following your lead now.
Okay. Just scrolling down, sorry. So it starts with the 2015 Netflix documentary Making a Murder was a worldwide sensation. The 10-part series told the story of Stephen Avery of Manitowoc, Wisconsin, and his nephew, Brendan Dassey, who were convicted of the gruesome 2006 homicide of Teresa Halbach. The series raised serious questions about whether the two were actually guilty or the victims of law enforcement maleficence. Viewers were, bear with me while I scroll, my computer's slow, divided with as many not guilty. Viewers were not nearly as divided, however, about Avery's 16-year-old nephew, Brendan Dassey. I just want to say that was certainly the point for me when I watched Making a Murderer. I wasn't sure about Stephen, but I was sure about Brendan.
Yeah.
Brendan was a developmentally delayed special education student whose treatment by all parts of the criminal justice system, including his own attorney, was at best an embarrassment and at worst the direct cause of a grotesque wrongful conviction. For many, the most disturbing aspect was the footage of eager law enforcement extracting a confession from Brendan in ways that were both comical and cynical. And wasn't that the truth? It was just hilarious.
Oh, I couldn't believe it. I sat there and went, "Are you serious? Is this really going on?" It blows my mind.
I couldn't believe that it was real, was what I couldn't believe.
That was my thing too, Michelle. I could not believe that it was real. Is this real? That's what there was the biggest question in my head. And if it is, oh Lord.
And at that point, when I saw some of the interrogation, I truly believed that there was no way Brendan would be in jail or be convicted or.
Yeah. But they didn't leave you with anything. I had to find out if it was real and if he was still in jail.
I was shocked to find out because I came along in 2018, so I was shocked to find out he was still in jail.
Yeah, exactly. Craziness. Yeah, it did make my skin crawl.
Yeah, absolutely. One commentator likened the interrogation to training a new puppy. The most memorable part of the interrogation came when investigators harangued Brendan about what he had done to Miss Halbach's head. Brendan proceeded to guess, cut off her hair, punched her, cut her throat. When he said he could not remember anything else, despite investigators' insistence, they blurted out, "All right, I'm just going to come out and ask you, who shot her in the head?" Brendan replied, "He did." When asked why he had not told them, Brendan said, "Because I couldn't think of it." And that was a really, really poignant moment for me, that the fact that he said, "Because I couldn't think of it," because Brendan reminds me of my son who has autism, and they're very black and white. Mm-hmm. And so I couldn't think of it, said to me, I could think of everything else you could do to a head, but I couldn't think of a gunshot.
Yeah, because I couldn't fathom it. That's not in my head. You know what I mean? I could never think of shooting anybody. So why would I say it?
Yeah, it's not just a case of a remark like I couldn't think of it. He literally couldn't think of anything else that you could do to a head.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's
Yeah.
like it just never ever would enter his mind whatsoever that would, that's just not something. That's not the way he thinks. But when I heard them say, "Okay, Brendan, who shot her in the head?" I thought, you're doing something that cops should never do. That's giving away something only the killer should know.
Yeah, it's fact feeding, isn't it?
And you're feeding it to somebody who's trying to please you by their answers, is what I seen. Brendan was just trying to get to his last class.
Yep, definitely. What was I? Yeah. Later, after Brendan had confessed to raping and killing Miss Hallback, he asked if he could return to school because he had a project due in 6 hours. Another defining moment for me, because who confesses to murder and asks to go back to school?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not surprisingly, the full statement is filled with contradictions and physical impossibilities. Nevertheless, law enforcement cobbled together enough of a confession to form the basis of the charge that Brendan had assisted Stephen Avery in killing Miss Hallback. Despite glaring overreach by law enforcement, this series only captured a minuscule fraction. The trial court found that Brendan's confession was voluntary and it was admitted as the primary piece of evidence at his trial, which is crazy. I don't know how that even happened. I don't even understand it.
No, me neither. That's something I could never.
As we said, it was so comical that how does it stand in a court of law?
Right. Well, how does any court of law in any of this? I mean, I know you got a lot more to read, but if you think of Brendan's investigation or interrogation, the interview, so-called interview, and you watch it, like you said, you're like, okay, this kid didn't do nothing. Okay, now you gave him the answers. Okay, this kid didn't do nothing. This isn't real. That's what I just kept thinking. This isn't real. This doesn't happen. This doesn't really happen this way. Does this really happen this way? No, my mind said it don't happen this way because I've never heard of it. So
no, that was the thing that really pulled me to Brendan's story, was the fact that, I had obviously seen wrongful convictions before and things like that, coerced confessions. I hadn't exposed myself as deep as I have now, but I just couldn't fathom that this could happen. So my thing was just, only happens in Wisconsin, surely. This state has just got it all wrong.
And me being right next door, I was like, that's happening next door to me? No way. That's the state I go over. I have friends over there. We go party. We go camping. We go to the bars. That's happening there? No way. That's how I felt.
Yeah. He was convicted as a party to the homicide and sentenced to life imprisonment. Also, how does that happen to a child? I don't understand either, but, The voluntariness of Brendan's confession was the primary issue in an unsuccessful state appeal and federal habeas corpus action. Brendan continues to serve a life sentence. The co-authors watched Making a Murderer with both personal and professional interest. Of course, we were taken by the drama, though we knew the outcome for Avery and Dassey long before the show ever appeared. But we were particularly intrigued by the interrogation of Brendan Dassey. More specifically, we were curious about the linguistic aspects of the interrogation. We both have professional interest in language impairments, deficits in language and language usage. We are well aware that despite the innocuous name, language impairments can be a serious disability with potentially catastrophic effects. We are also aware that individuals with language impairments are substantially overrepresented in the criminal and juvenile justice systems. Just going to scroll here. Though the documentary never came out and said that Brendan had a language impairment, throughout the program and the criminal case itself, there are references to Brendan's intellectual deficits and borderline IQ. But there are few specifics. We were fairly certain he did. And if he did, we were certain it would have had a profound effect on the interrogation. Our first step was an easy online search of court records, where we found documentation that Brendan did indeed have a severe language-based specific learning disability and multifaceted language impairment that placed his communication and processing skills in the lowest percentiles of all juveniles in his age. that was a thing that struck me, that it took them nothing to find that. It took these ladies nothing to find that. They found
It
it
is
so
true, and you think that they were very well aware, the detectives were very well aware of this fact, just due to the fact that they were pulling him out of school and they knew that he was in special classes.
Yeah, and they were handed his file, and it had it all in it. Yeah.
So you had to think that they would know that there was definitely language issues, learning issues, communication issues.
Okay, if you think about it for a second, do you think that they knew when the investigators, and we're talking about Dassey and Uyghur there, when they took him, do you think they looked at his records and said, we're not really going to get anything out of him? Do you think that they even thought about looking at the records and thinking about his mental capacity when they were interviewing? I mean, what are your thoughts on the investigators having this information on Brendan's learning disabilities and still continuing with what they were doing?
I think yeah, sorry, Becca, go.
No, I was just going to say, if you want my personal opinion, I think they did know, and I think that they knew that they could use that to their advantage.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion.
Manipulation tactics, surely.
Yeah.
Just to get the job done, or the job closed, or the notch in the belt then, in other words. They didn't care, basically.
Yeah. Well, like, I feel like they knew that what they were getting into, as far as, like, because that goes along with the whole, like, they wanted Steven no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At any consequence.
Right.
And so I believe that they knew that we're going to get something out of this kid. We're going to get what we wanted.
Okay.
I think that Brendan, not being aware of what was going on, gave them more than what they were hoping for.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
But
Brendan not knowing what was going on, unfortunately implicated. Now, do I think that they wanted him to go to jail or prison? Probably not. But I don't think they were going to stop it.
Yeah, I don't think it had went so far of him implicating himself with
implicating himself. But I think they knew they knew that they were going to get something out of him.
I thought my opinion is, I think they thought they would get something on Steven through him, but when in the line of questioning they had for him, it made him implicate himself.
Yeah.
Too far into it, so where they couldn't legally, or they felt they couldn't.
I think that they were aware of that pretty quickly, though, and they ran with it, and they did not keep Brendan. And O'Kelly said it best when he was on the phone to Kaczynski, where he was like, the gene pool needs to be here. He was a throwaway. They just didn't care.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was just very curious on what, if they know this stuff, and these ladies found this stuff right away. It wasn't, like you said, hard for them to find out what was going on. And I just wanted to know, basically your thoughts on, they knew this too then, and this is kind of, when I hear this, every time I look at this and I think these ladies looked this up right away. They found it, and these guys still pursued with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when Uyghur and Fassbender left the room on a couple of occasions, I just have this image of them going into another room and just rubbing their hands together and, like that, we can't believe what we're getting out of this kid, and going back for more.
Yeah.
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 Instead of saying, well, hang on a second, this guy's putting himself in it, and none of it's made sense because none of it adds up.
Right.
But they still went back for more, and gutting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree. I think I do. And I also think that once they knew they really could get away or get anything they wanted, there was a lot more that they tried to get. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Jinxie says they wanted him to be a witness at a point, to point the finger at Avery, like I said. You know, like she agrees.
Yeah.
They did know he was limited in some ways and thought that they could manipulate him. However, he couldn't remember the details they wanted. And that's 100% true. I believe that.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel the same way, James. In my personal opinion, I feel that way. A
Because he was
military.
getting confused with the story's so big and elaborate. Brendan, of course, is going to get confused by anything they're trying to get him to say.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mary Jo's Savane. I'm terrible at names, dear, so we'll just call you MS. A military recruiter took my son out of high school. I was mad about it, and when I talked to the school, they said it should have never happened, not allowed. I hate that this happened to Brendan. You're right. That's another thing. I blame the school for allowing them to do that. You know, but
I don't blame the school for allowing them to do that, but I think because they did have Bub's permission, so to speak.
I was going to say that's for further discussion.
The fact that no one was with Brendan, I think that someone from the school should have been with Brendan.
Yeah, didn't he have an advocate?
So to speak, yeah.
Yeah, he had an advocate, didn't he? I mean, somebody was there to help him learn, a social worker or whatever.
No,
somebody that was there.
Not necessarily in the way you think. They had somebody, probably another student or a teacher aide, sit there and read him.
Yeah.
Then not necessarily like an advocate like what you think.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. If it was somebody that was just, an advocate type, a social worker that he had too, because my daughter had AEP or an IEP, excuse me, and she had, a social, like a counselor type for her, I think all kids do.
No, and they probably did have a counselor or something, but like, honestly, the school system failed him horribly.
Yeah, if anyone allowed him to walk out of the school ground with police officers under the circumstances, because everyone was aware of what was going on.
Exactly.
I think that's just disgraceful, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'll keep going. Brendan's brutally low scores, which one expert termed appalling, inspired us to undertake a closer look at the language of the interrogations. With the assistance of a language transcription company, we conducted a thorough qualitative and quantitative analysis of the communication and language of the complete interrogation. We took a deep look under the hood, examining the volume and structure as well as the content of what was said by both Brendan and law enforcement. We quickly concluded that the interviewing technique utilised by law enforcement was a chaotic, unprofessional mess. That could not have been worded better. Chaotic and unprofessional mess. Almost everything the two officers did in the course of interrogating Brendan violated the most minimal standards for interviewing any juvenile, but especially one with underdeveloped language and communication skills. They inundated him with the verbiage, continuously asked multiple questions within a single turn, spoke in paragraphs, changed topics in the middle of an oration, asked hundreds of leading questions, and planted content thousands of times. By the time we finished our review, we were and are confident that the verbal behaviour of law enforcement throughout the interrogations of Brendan, coupled with his poor ability to linguistically cope and his age, made him a prime candidate for unwillingly and unwittingly confessing to a crime he did not commit. Our analysis has little in common with the voluntariness ruling by the trial court. The ruling demonstrated a remarkable ignorance of how humans communicate in general, let alone the special issues presented by someone like Brendan Dassey. The decision instead closely passed apparent promises of leniency to show that they were not actual promises of leniency, and noted that the law enforcement did not yell and allow Brendan to sit on a soft couch. The decision even suggested that Brendan was not really a special education student because part of his school days were spent in regular track high school classes. Tragically, this decision was the foundation for a long legal journey that ended in June 2018 with a denial of certiorari by the US Supreme Court. And I wasn't around for that, so I didn't feel the heartbreak that you all probably did. And I can't even imagine that.
It was bad.
Yeah, I can't even imagine it.
But for me, it wasn't as bad as the day I found out that he passed his lie detector test. I was down for a week. I swear, I was in tears. I was like, how can this happen? And I thought the same thing with all the court stuff. It was like, talk about, oh my gosh, I'm touching the outside, and then boom, gone.
Yeah, to win and then lose,
yeah, poof, gone. It's unimaginable. Exactly, good word for it. Okay.
Yeah, it's the Supreme Court was, because it felt more like an end of a line sort of thing. So for me, it was very devastating.
Finalizing, finalizing.
Yeah, it was very devastating. And I was at work, so I was spending all day in the bathroom just sobbing. So
I can only imagine. For me, it was just another, essentially domino effect. Every time I read more about Brendan or understood more, it was like, bang, he gets kicked again, bang, he gets kicked again. So for me, it was I didn't sort of feel like, I think, what you might have all felt, being in the moment.
Yeah. No, it was pretty really heartbreaking and terrible. And that was one of the reasons why I had a hard time watching the second Making a Murderer.
Yeah.
Was because it was like revisiting all those emotions again. I couldn't imagine for him himself, you know what I mean? Like going through all that.
I can't watch the second one very much. It's just too much. Yeah, it just brings back too much, and it's just it's a finalizing thing, and that's why I feel so strongly about this. I think all of us do feel so strongly about knowing more about Brendan situation, about speaking about it more and more loudly and more in your face, and just pounding the texts, pounding the posts, pounding the Twitter feeds, all that stuff. I think and this is a good way to really, get you mad, is read this paper, because you'll understand Brendan, and you'll really understand how mad we all get about knowing this stuff,
And it helps you retell his story, because you do have a deeper understanding of him himself.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, when you first told me about this, Michelle, when I had you on my channel, I was like, I got to see what that is. And wow, your Bible. I like the way you say it. It's your Bible.
It's my Bible.
Yes, I love that. Okay, I'm sorry. Continue.
Admittedly, nobody else involved in the case seemed to know much about communication or Brendan's impairments either. Not law enforcement, not even his own pretrial attorney. A record of Brendan's language disability and its significance were never developed during pretrial hearings, although counsel possessed the testing results. Of course, in order to remain so oblivious, all parties must have completely disregarded the records that laid out Brendan's deficits in the plainest of terms. And they must have been blind to the behavioural and verbal cues that Brendan would have provided any time they met. Because it's obvious when you see him, to me, that something is amiss, basically. You don't have to be educated in speech pathology. But to me, it's obvious that something's amiss with Brendan, that he's not showing the cues of understanding what is being said to him. And again, I always refer to my son, as a lot of other people do, but I get that blank look on his face sometimes when I tell him to do something. And
the lack of what, sitting up straight, playing with his fingers.
And they fly under the radar a little bit because they don't say, I don't understand or I'm confused.
Right.
You're trying to hide it and mask it all the time.
Do you think that they just believe that maybe everybody thinks that way? Because my daughter said, well, Mom, I just thought everybody had racing brain. You know what I mean? That's what she called it. That's what she called it, racing brain. So, maybe he just thought it was normal.
I guess it just depends, because like I know for a lot of people that have this kinds of struggles with communicating and stuff, they realize that they're not being understood or heard or whatever, but they try to blend in with everybody else because that's what they think you all want to see. So like people who have, like, for instance, Asperger's often do that a lot. They'll try to mimic human behavior that they see, that they think that's what you want.
Yep. Absolutely. Well said.
That's what it's my understanding of things like Asperger's, autism, and not saying Brendan's any of that, but
No,
I like,
neither am I. There's
I think
a lot of my son in
there
Brendan.
was like a degree of him saying, like, wanting to fit in or want to make the person that's communicating with him happy.
A pleaser. A pleaser, you know, they just,
so
you know,
if
screw nothing up. They're very passive. They're just okay. If I'm not going to argue that fact, if that's, you know, better than I do, that's fine. You know, I mean, but like, for instance, my biggest, and I don't know if this has anything, but like, if you were to ask him back then, like, do you know what your Miranda rights are? Then he probably said yes. And then if he said, well, explain them to me, then he probably wouldn't know.
No, and they would have figured that out had they done that simple question.
Yeah, explain it to me. Because that's oftentimes you'll see people who have communication issues, especially children and teenagers. Do you understand what this word means? Yes. Okay, well then what's the definition? Oh, I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah, exactly. This article describes our under-the-hood analysis of the interrogations of Brendan Dassey and explains why we believe that reckless and amateurish behaviour of law enforcement in the face of Brendan's communication deficits directly contributed to an involuntary and utterly unreliable confession. We are hardly alone in thinking that the confession violates the most basic standards of common decency and due process, and that even with the existing record, it never should have been admitted at trial. Our analysis simply provides another layer. You could say that this is our fantasy attempt to supplement the record, albeit a decade later. This is also our attempt to, I don't know what this one word is, proselytise our language impairments and their insidious effects. Our approach is interdisciplinary and informed by our experiences and research in two different fields, law and speech-language pathology, which I absolutely love that came together. And that was the biggest thing for me that I took from this, was that, you know, lots of people said in Making a Murderer, you know, now I want to be a lawyer and I want to advocate for wrongful convictions and I want to volunteer with those things. But for me, it was the speech-language side of it. I thought this could make such a massive difference in law, and I don't know why it's not utilised more.
Yeah.
Especially with juveniles in particular.
Oh, yeah,
While the legal community in the United States is just beginning to notice the speech-language profession, we have found that law and speech-language pathology are a natural fit. Co-author Dr. Sally Miles, clinical and research expertise in the field of speech-language pathology, has allowed us to collect and analyse language data in ways not usually found in law. I just lost my spot. She has also provided clinical observations along with the expert opinions of the type that a lawyer would rely on both in and out of court. This article will not rehash or reframe the material covered in the pleadings filed in the state and federal court on Brendan's behalf. Those motions and supporting briefs did a masterful job of describing the myriad of ways that law enforcement unambiguously fed Brendan, a child, specific incriminating details, promised leniency, and repeatedly lied about their superior knowledge. Here, the focus is not so much on what was said by law enforcement, but how it was said, and why how it was said would prey on the very specific weaknesses of someone like Brendan. We provide examples throughout our analysis and discussion, but readers are encouraged to listen to the recordings of the interrogations to get the full flavour. This article is foundation heavy. We spend considerable time talking about the language impairments in general and the science of interviewing. This type of background information is necessary for our analysis to make any sense. Then we turn to the case. First, we discuss what we learned about Brendan's language impairments from his school records, or in-court record, and what they tell us about his communicative ability to cope in an interrogation. Then we move on to our qualitative and quantitative analysis of the interrogations. We certainly looked at Brendan's verbal and non-verbal conduct, but as the discussion reflects, we ended up paying more attention to law enforcement's verbal and non-verbal conduct because it was so much more remarkable and not in a good way. Finally, we returned to the court decisions, the trial court and the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals en banc majority, to show how courts completely missed the realities of Brendan's impairments and the egregiousness of the interviewing technique used by law enforcement. There will be no happy ending to this article. As Judge Lana Rover said in her scathing dissent to the Seventh Circuit en banc decision, this is a profound miscarriage of justice. The best we can hope is that the knowledge and principles we have applied can inform other cases. There are countless Brendan Dasseys at the receiving end of the criminal justice system, and they all deserve justice. Okay, State of Wisconsin versus Brendan Dassey. Teresa Hallback of northeastern Wisconsin went missing on October 31, 2005. She was last seen on the property of Stephen Avery of Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Within 2 weeks, it was determined that she had been murdered and her body mutilated. Ms. Hallback's remains were found on Avery's property. From the beginning, Avery was the prime suspect. On November 5th, Avery's 16-year-old nephew, Brendan Dassey, who lived with his family down the road from Avery, was interviewed by law enforcement from neighbouring Marinette County. Law enforcement was attempting to find out whether Brendan had seen Ms. Hallback on Avery's property. Avery was officially charged with the crime on November 15th, 2005. In February 2006, law enforcement was alerted to the fact that Brendan had been acting strangely and had been seen on Avery's property on October 31st. On February 27th, Brendan was interviewed by Calumet County Sheriff's investigator Mark Wiegert and Wisconsin Department of Justice Special Agent Tom Fassbender. He was questioned twice with his mother's consent, once at school and then at the local police station. I also just want to say I don't even know what led them to keep interviewing him, because he had kept telling the same story at the beginning, that he was at home and he played his game and he ate and he ate and he went to bed. So,
well,
anyway.
I can kind of add what I think of that. What I think of that is when that tick, tick, tick cop, when he was interviewing him, Brendan changed a little bit of what he said to him, like first he said he wasn't looking and then he said he was. So that's when he went back and said, I think you can get this guy to change his story. And if you just keep talking to him. And you know what I mean? Gave him the heads up on Brendan and how he acted, because that's what happened. That's when I seem to think that they thought, oop, we got him. You know what I mean? That was my.
I said to him, or Brendan said to them, do you think Stephen did it? So they were already planting the seed, so to speak.
I just want sorry for interrupting, but YouTube is reacting funny to some of the people here. We are not blocking you. We're not taking your wrenches, because as you can see, it's taking my wrench and giving it back to me every once in a while. It's also not letting Catnip comment. So if that happens to you, I don't know what's going on. Becca doesn't know, but we will check after the show. Okay. So there we go. Sorry.
On March 1st, Wiegert and Fassbender met Brendan at school and told him they wanted to interview him some more at the local police station, again with his mother's permission. After a tortuous process, Brendan began to affirm or provide a series of incriminating details, which formed the basis of a confession. Based on this confession to Wiegert and Fassbender, Brendan was charged as a party to the crime of homicide. The confession was the primary evidence against him. It was the only evidence against him. Pre-trial counsel Len Kaczynski filed a motion to suppress on the grounds that Brendan's statement was not voluntary. The school psychologist testified that Brendan had documented cognitive and learning deficits. After hearing the testimony and watching a recording of the March 1st interrogation, the court denied the motion, finding that the confession was voluntary. In its decision, the court made 12 findings of fact about Brendan's behaviour and characteristics and law enforcement conduct. As will be discussed in part 7, in these findings, the resulting conclusions of law, the trial court demonstrated little awareness of the subtleties of Brendan's communication, developmental and cognitive issues, even less awareness of the subtleties of Wiegert and Fassbender's communication, and absolutely no recognition Sorry, lost where I was then. Of how the combination would have affected the interrogation. Brendan went to trial. Trial counsel sought to show that Brendan's confession was unreliable and inherently false. Again, the school psychologist testified, as did an expert on suggestibility. Brendan himself testified, hapless trying to explain how he came to confess to a crime he said he did not commit. The jury convicted him. On appeal, the central issue was the voluntariness of Brendan's confession to Wiegand and Fassbender. Appellate counsel first proceeded under a Wisconsin post-conviction statute that allows a defendant to return to the trial court to supplement the record before proceeding with an appeal. At the hearing on the post-conviction motion, counsel presented Dr. Richard Leo, who testified at length regarding the science of false confessions. Dr. Leo also testified about Wiegand and Fassbender's coercive techniques and Brendan's vulnerability to those techniques because of his age and intellectual limitations. A central point of contention was the number of times that Wiegand and Fassbender contaminated the interview by directly feeding facts, which were then parroted back by Brendan. The motion was denied. Mind-blowing. The court reaffirmed its original findings and bolstered those findings with the strength of the case. The Wisconsin Court of Appeals affirmed the trial court rulings in a short 23-paragraph opinion. In the brief 2 paragraphs that analysed the circumstances of the interrogation and confession, the court adopted the trial's court findings wholesale. The trial court heard the testimony of Dassey's mother, his school psychologist, and a police interviewer, and had the benefit of listening to the audio tapes and viewing the videotaped interviews. The trial court found that Dassey had a low average to borderline IQ, but was in mostly regular track high school classes, was interviewed while seated on an upholstered couch, never was physically restrained, and was offered food, beverages, and restroom breaks, was properly Mirandized, not true, and did not appear to be agitated.
Why don't you touch on that? Your feeling of the that what you just said. I can't even say it. My brain.
Mirandized?
Yes. Why?
It's so vague, the amount of times, and I think they touch on it a little bit in here too, but the amount or the length of the Miranda law and reading that to Brendan, like he's lost interest one sentence in. He can't take all that in. It's too much.
And how about when they got him in there again and they just said, do you remember when I read you?
Yes.
You're right.
Yes.
And he just says, yes. And okay, well then just sign this. So
and part of that for me too is that I think, as we all have tended to in the past, maybe, you believe that the police are doing the right thing. So Brendan agreeing to that, he's not thinking anything is coming to harm him.
Right.
Yeah.
But do you think that them knowing how Brendan accepts things, do you think they believed that he remembered, or that he didn't remember and it doesn't matter?
I feel like there's part of shadiness to it.
Because I don't think Brendan remembered it, I'm sure.
Well, and you also got to think, like, in general, like society, like how many Americans actually know what the Miranda law is?
Yeah.
And it's just so ingrained in our culture too. If you that any one of us could say, yeah, I know them. Yeah. But then, do you really know them?
No, I don't. You know? I would be lying, but I would be just like, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Just to make it go by. Oh. But I mean, really, for Brendan, I really think he didn't remember, and they just didn't care to do it again.
Yeah.
Because maybe he would have, like, maybe caught something he didn't catch the first time, and had a thought about it. You know what I mean? I don't know.
I don't even know if he would catch it, honestly, Linda. Like, I feel like if the Miranda law is in a language that is over a lot of our heads.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that with somebody, like anybody, actually, you'd have to layman's terms it, and I don't think he ever would have had a chance with the Miranda law in general. But that's why he should have had proper advocate with him. Yeah,
right.
who knew the law and who knew what the Miranda, even somebody beyond, like, let's say a parent. You know what I mean?
Right. Like
a lawyer who specializes in juvenile.
Right. I think that helps, don't you, to maybe further, show them that this is something that children, because remember, he was a child, don't understand, and they need to have somebody there on their side, and they should make it mandatory.
Yeah.
I agree.
And did not appear to be agitated or intimidated at any point in the questioning. The court also found that the investigators used normal speaking tones with no hectoring, threats, or promises of leniency, prodded him to be honest as a reminder of his moral duty to tell the truth, and told him that they were in his corner and would go to bat for him and try to achieve a rapport with Dassey and to convince him that being truthful would be in his best interest. The court concluded that Dassey's confession was voluntary and admissible. The trial court's findings are not clearly erroneous. The Wisconsin Supreme Court declined to take preview. Attorneys then filed a petition for habeas corpus in the Eastern District of Wisconsin. In a lengthy opinion, magistrates the confession in light of the conduct of Wiegert and Fassbender and their highly leading questions. The court acknowledged significant doubts as to the reliability of Dassey's confession, but also acknowledged that as a constitutional matter, reliability is for the jury, not for the court ruling on voluntariness. The court went on, however, to find that looking at the totality of the circumstances, including Brendan's age, lack of familiarity with the criminal justice system, lack of a parent present, Wiegert and Fassbender's paternalistic and exploitive behaviour, and promises of leniency, Brendan's confession was involuntary and the case was remanded. A divided three-judge panel of the US Court of Appeals of the Seventh Circuit affirmed that ruling. That should never have gone beyond that, in my opinion. I know it's not very common either. So the decision was subsequently reversed by an en banc panel of the Court of Appeals in December 2017. In the 4-3 decision, the court found that despite its relative brevity, the State Court of Appeals' terse two-paragraph endorsement of the trial court findings was sufficient to satisfy the reasonableness standard of 28 U.S.C. 2254, and that the federal courts were therefore required to defer to the state court findings. There were two strongly worded dissents. The first, by Chief Judge Diane Wood, began. Did I skip there? I did, sorry. Psychological coercion, questions to which the police furnished the answers, and ghoulish games of 20 questions in which Brendan Dassey guessed over and over again before he landed on the correct story, the one the police wanted, led to the confession that furnished the only serious evidence supporting his murder conviction in the Wisconsin courts. What also struck me, I'm sort of jumping in here, but where Brendan was convicted, I don't actually remember even what the term was, but of rape. I'm not sure how that happens just based off his confession, because there could be no evidence of that.
Well, there was no evidence of murder in that room. There was no evidence of blood or stabbing or any of that. There was, that is something that has completely made me furious when they give him a sexual assault.
The same thing.
They give him a sexual, he's a sexual predator. Okay. He was convicted of rape with absolutely no proof at all. Just his word.
Yeah, it blew my mind a little bit.
That one is the worst.
Of it either, so.
That's the worst for me. Bless you.
Thank you. Sorry.
You're welcome. That's okay. Doing a live is good luck. So thank you very much.
The Supreme Court denied certiorari on June 25, 2018. Why a speech language pathologist? One of the parts that I love. An unusual feature of this project is that it pairs a law professor with a speech language pathologist, a profession not commonly seen or well understood in the criminal or juvenile justice systems. While it is fairly well known that SLPs are the professionals who work with children who have difficulties with S's, L's, R's, who stutter, people unfamiliar with the field may be surprised at the full breadth of SLP's professional activities, expertise and services. The full scope of the practice includes all aspects of communication across the full lifespan, from infants, toddlers, preschool and school-age children, and adolescents to adults of all ages. Language development and disorders have long been primary areas of expertise for SLPs, and no other profession holds this expertise. SLPs work predominantly with clients who have delays or disorders, many of which occur, as with Brendan, developmentally, i.e. not the result of illness or trauma. SLPs provide screening and discourse analysis to identify potential communication problems, full-scale evaluation and diagnosis, intervention, therapy services, counselling and education for clients and their families, educators and other providers. In other words, an SLP is well suited for involvement in criminal cases where a juvenile or adult has a suspected or already diagnosed language deficit. Just like Sherlock Holmes, a good SLP's business is to know what other people don't know and to observe what others cannot see. A good SLP will see under the surface into the underlying interconnected complexities of the communication and cognitive systems and understand the significance of developmental processes. Seeing beneath the surface is especially important in this case because so much was decided or overlooked based on the appearance of things. Brendan appeared to be functioning well in the interview. He appeared to understand. He appeared to agree to so much of what the police said. The police appeared to be calm, appeared to be gentle, and appeared to be just asking the kid some questions as he sat on a comfortable couch. No one bothered to go under the hood because they thought they knew. They thought they could rely on the common sense, but they did not recognise their own ignorance. They clearly did not know that their common sense would not serve in this situation. Once again, Sherlock says it best. You did not know where to look, and so you missed all that was important. So true. Well, unlike a forensic psychologist who address mental and behavioural functioning, an SLP is trained to go beyond generalities about communication problems and can correct the kind of misconceptions that occurred in this case. An SLP can provide a detailed description of the deficits, whether it's processing, verbal, memory, or narrative, and what those deficits mean in actual communication situations. The SLP, okay. Sorry, go.
I was just going to say, can we just talk about that part right there when it talks about all the different things that they have there, the memory, the narrative, there's different difficulties there.
Yes.
Some people might only have just one or two, or they might have all of them. Okay. You know what I mean? So if Brendan had just one or two, it was probably detailed, in details. You know what I mean? The processing of the detail and then giving them the answer, or in other words, their narrative. You know what I mean? He didn't, even as I think he was saying things, he didn't think of it as the whole picture of what he was saying. He just thought of it as a statement. That was the end of that one. We're on to something different. You know what I mean?
Yep. I agree with you.
Okay.
The processing thing was a big thing for me because it's what he's taking in and then obviously what he's responding to that.
Right. Well, yeah. I just was my opinion. I think he just didn't, that's what I think.
No, I agree. The SLP can offer insights about an individual's nonverbal communication and the connection between an individual's language deficits and behaviour. Equally important, the SLP can analyse the communication of the other persons who interacted with the impaired individual. This can be critical when, as here, the verbal and non-verbal communication of the other people in the conversation, i.e. law enforcement, matters as much as the communication of the impaired person. So true. Language impairments are primer. That Brendan had a severe language impairment that profoundly interfered with his functioning is incontrovertible. Unfortunately, few people in the Manitowoc County Courthouse seem to haven't even noticed. To be fair, Manitowoc is hardly unique. We therefore feel that an overview of language impairments is in order before turning to Brendan. Language impairments, what are they? Language is an organised system governed by rules and conventions that speakers follow without knowing it. Language is a powerful tool comprised of three large domains: form, meaning, and use. It has a significant non-verbal dimension and integrates cognitive systems such as attention, memory, problem-solving, executive functioning, and social emotional skills. Despite all of its power, however, the processing of acquiring a language in early childhood can be easily disrupted by a number of psychological physiological, psychological, and environmental forces. When that happens, the resulting impairment can be devastating and lifelong. I mean, this might seem like a bit of fluff in here, but I think it's kind of important to follow on and understand where they go with it. So that's why I'm reading this part.
No, that's good. I think it's good.
The term language impairment, also known as language disorder, generally refers to the deficiencies in language competency. It encompasses weaknesses in 3 realms of spoken language: expressive, receptive, and pragmatic. Expressive and receptive comprehension deficits affect vocabulary, syntax, semantics, and processing. These skills are directly related to the ability to decipher meaning and to adequately recall and relay information. According to the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists, lack of these vital communication skills results in poor knowledge, processing, and application of culturally relevant and often quite subtle behaviour that assists in establishing and maintaining relationships of varying degrees of complexity. Pragmatic deficits relate to the behavioural effects of communication. Deficiencies in this aspect of language reveal themselves in a lack of social cognition and ability to take that perspective of the other person, and a failure to appropriately adapt in interactions. Individuals with pragmatic issues often lack the ability to accurately process a face-to-face interaction and have difficulty processing non-verbal content as well as verbal content. So, yeah, just him picking up on Uyghur touching his knee and putting his arm around him, those things, you know, the non-verbal ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was also probably a good distractor for he stopped paying attention as well.
Yeah. Developmental language impairments are the result of disruption in a child's language acquisition process. The causes can be underlying communication disorder such as hearing loss, auditory processing disorder, and underlying cognitive deficit, or external conditions such as extreme poverty, trauma, abuse, or neglect. Language impairments will also co-occur with the associated disorders such as ADHD, learning disability, or pervasive developmental disorder. Language impairments rarely exist in isolation because language is so essential to human functioning. Communication deficits invariably give rise to cognitive, social, academic, behavioural, and/or emotional difficulties. Any one of these can have a profound influence on an individual's ability to effectively navigate through life, even after the individual has acquired enough language to get by in daily living or to appear normal. In fact, although language impairment is often classified as a childhood disorder, a child does not grow out of it. The effects and deficits will typically continue into late adolescence and adulthood.
So, pausing there, do we want to pause for the day or?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think at an hour, haven't we?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And plus that, I really want to get people involved in coming over and discussing it for themselves too, because we get comments in the chat, you know, and I know people are wanting to share their opinions of it too. They, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I just know poor Michelle here has been reading for almost an hour.
Yeah, exactly. And very good too. Love the accent.
Hopefully next time we do this, we're going to be actually in the Discord. And that way a lot more people can interact better, and hopefully we won't have these issues like we're having today on YouTube.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a bugger.
It is a bugger. It's taking my wrench and giving me a wrench. How can you do that?
Yeah, I don't know what's been going on, but yeah, unless anybody has any questions or comments or anything else going on in the, I can't see the live chat. I'm only seeing the StreamYard one, so I can't see the actual Facebook or not the Facebook.
I've been watching the YouTube chat, so I get like all of it. Yeah.
If anybody has any comments or questions or anything.
There was a good comment up here from Alice. There's no way Brendan understood that law whatsoever. He only heard that on TV, so he may have been believing it. He may not have believed it. I'm not quite sure what point we were talking about though.
Maybe
It might have been the Miranda.
Yes. So
Yeah.
he didn't understand that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
And I agree too, just because, like I said, yeah, it's in our culture so much. Like you see it in TV shows, you see it like in movies, and it's like, so like, are we aware that it's there? Of course we do, but do we know what it is? No.
right.
When
I tell
and
you,
with somebody
further
like,
down about, I think it's 12 sentences long or something. They do touch on it further in, but
okay.
it's far too many
Is it?
sentences to dart at Brendan to understand each one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree.
And plus, it's a language. I believe it's in a like legal language that not a lot of people, not a lot of regular adults would get, much less a kid.
Yeah.
Who's
It's
got
not layman's terms. It's not really layman's terms.
Yeah.
It's put in a way that is legally confusing.
And plus, you've got the fact, if you think about it, like, and I know some of it is like you have the right to remain silent, anything you
Right.
say. But then you have somebody come in right after that saying, "Tell us the truth. Tell us the truth.
Right.
You need to tell us what you saw. You need to like." And so it's like, yeah, you have the right to remain silent, but let me pressure you into talking.
And
Right.
Brendan has said himself, he thought he was helping. He just wanted to help.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, because you got them saying like, we just need you to talk. We just need you to say what you think you saw, or what,
Yeah, we're on
like
your
what's
side,
your own
Brendan. I'm here
butch, and
for you,
like,
Brendan.
yeah.
I'm here for you, Brendan. We're on your side, Brendan. Just tell us the truth. I mean, I can almost verbatim say their sick words, and that's bad. But I want to, it's a good study. This is a very good study. You know what I mean? To try to understand exactly what it is, because we don't suffer from that. So what might be very easy for us is very, very difficult for them. And it makes a big difference when you're dealing with somebody's freedoms, somebody's murder. You're trying to get the right person. And you don't want the wrong person in prison. At least most people don't. And I'd like to believe the courts really don't. But it's not a way to go about it. With somebody having this, it should be a law that they do suffer from this, then they're not going to understand that they need an advocate or somebody to explain it in their terms. You can't interview or interrogate somebody like that. That's what I think. Really know what they're doing with somebody's mental stability before they interrogate them.
Exactly.
Yeah. And they don't give room for that in the law. But anyway, everybody's saying they'll come join us in Discord. And thanks for reading so much.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
And I hope everyone has a good evening.
Thanks,
Bye.
Becca. Bye, Michelle.
Bye. Bye.